AMA is short for Ask Me Anything, and as you probably know or might guess, it's a type of post where you can ask someone any question about themselves, an experience they had, or a topic they are knowledgeable on. The concept began on Reddit, and over the years a number of notable figures have done them, including Barack Obama, Bill Gates, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. But today we're going to cover a few of the most disturbing AMAs, including a psychopath who is a homicide detective, someone who was tortured, and someone who was falsely accused of a very serious crime. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to gain access to uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. This video will cover topics that some might find triggering, including antisocial personality disorder, torture, and SA. Viewer discretion is advised. You can become a Ko-fi member to watch an uncut and ad-free version of this video, which features a whole extra AMA that was unsuitable for this cut. A recent post on the AMA subreddit was titled, "I am a psychopath and a homicide detective, AMA." That's quite an interesting combination. Contrary to somewhat popular belief, most psychopaths are not criminals, let alone murderers, but psychopaths are more likely to commit crimes, and it is estimated that around 25% of prisoners in the US meet the criteria for a diagnosis. With this in mind, I wonder if being a psychopath would actually make you a better detective, as you might be able to understand the mind of a criminal better. It's worth noting that you can't officially be diagnosed as a psychopath. The term is often used to describe a person who has been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD. Psychopathy was included in the first two editions of the DSM, but it was replaced with ASPD in the third edition. Signs of ASPD include exploitative and manipulative behaviour, lack of remorse and regret, inability to take accountability, and inability to control anger. Anyway, OP refers to himself as a psychopath, so for the sake of simplicity, we'll use that term to describe him. His post read, "As the title suggests, I'm a diagnosed psychopath, high-functioning ASPD technically, by 3 different psychiatrists/clinical psychologists. Since I know these will be asked, I'll just add some general background on myself. I am a homicide detective. No, I am not a serial killer. I have a master's degree in forensic psychology. I am married to a marriage counsellor and have 1 adult daughter from a former relationship. I see a lot of stuff about psychopaths that are mostly all one-sided, and chances are you've run across a psychopath or may have one in your friend group or bed." That final sentence is a little eerie. I've heard before that psychopaths are experts at portraying themselves as whatever character will maximise their ability to manipulate and gain what they want from you. They can appear to be totally different in front of different people, moulding their character to fit the type of person that you will get on with most. As OP says, you probably wouldn't even know if one of your friends or family members were a psychopath, as they are very careful not to let the mask slip. It's quite interesting that OP's wife is a marriage counsellor. I wonder if the fact she is a therapist allows her to have a high level of understanding and empathy for him. It's hard to imagine being married to someone that you know doesn't feel the same emotions towards you that others would, or that you do for them. Of course they could and probably would act like they do, but I don't know if I'd be able to shake the feeling that it was just a facade. One commenter asked a few questions about OP's marriage and his work that provides some insight. Quote, I assume your wife knows. How does that affect Joel's marriage? Have you ever cheated on her? What attracted you to your line of work? Do you find enjoyment in catching killers? Have you ever considered utilizing your experience in nefarious ways, violent or otherwise? Killed or tortured animals? Get off on hurting people, physically or otherwise? OP replied, "Yes, she does. It's how we met, actually. She knew what she was getting into when we first met, and we talked about my feelings, or the lack thereof, even before our first date. I did cheat a couple of times in the beginning. I was never very good at relationships until her and didn't see anything wrong with it. She broke up with me when she found out, before giving me another chance. I haven't since then. My father was also a psychopath, and our family has a lot of cops and other psychopaths in it. We all joined the Marines, then became cops for the same department. It is a family legacy that I joined and like doing. I can't say I enjoy catching killers, rather I enjoy doing the investigative work, putting the puzzle pieces together and solving the case. The only times I was ever violent were all on the job, and my youth, before my father intervened and gave me another outlet for my violent tendencies. When I was young, yes, I got bit by a snake and killed it, if that counts. Otherwise had no interest in animals. I box, I enjoy doing that, MMA too." When OP was asked what keeps him from cheating now, he said he and his wife make good partners and it'll devastate her. Another commenter pointed out that that sounds like he has some empathy. OP explained that he wouldn't call it empathy, but it would be a disruption to his life and that he likes her and enjoys being around her. This is similar to what I've heard from other psychopaths explaining why they aren't always committing crimes and wronging others. They don't feel guilty when they hurt others. It's not feeling bad for someone that stops them from hurting them, but they understand that their actions have consequences, and often the consequences make the action not worth the hassle. Also, there are different types of empathy. If you're not a psychopath and your mum starts crying in front of you, you probably have some level of emotional response to that. You feel sad and might even start tearing up yourself. This is emotional empathy. There is also cognitive empathy, which refers to an understanding of someone else's perspective and the ability to put yourself in their shoes. Most people experience both types, and while psychopaths lack emotional empathy, most research suggests that they can experience cognitive empathy. So if you're a psychopath and your mum starts crying next to you, you won't feel bad for her or feel sad yourself, but you might be able to understand why she is sad. Psychopaths can use their ability to experience cognitive empathy to manipulate people, but it can also allow them to understand how other people will react to their actions and to have an unemotional sense of right and wrong. So OP probably has some level of cognitive empathy, and if he cheats on his wife again, he won't feel guilty about it, nor will he feel bad for her, but he will understand that his wife would be devastated and it would threaten the relationship between them, which is beneficial for him. Another commenter asked a couple more questions about OP's relationships. Do you think being a psychopath has negatively impacted your relationships with those closest to you? Do you check in with your wife to make sure her emotional needs are being met, or does she just cater to you? OP replied, "Former relationships, yes. I was always called emotionally unavailable. If they only knew how true that was. I only wanted one thing out of them. If they intrigued me, I might consider actually having a relationship with them, but I had no desire. I did have a good relationship with my dad, we got along. I have friends and we get along. I'm open to them about being a psychopath and they don't care. They understand what it means. I do check in with my wife, she knows all about me so she tells me what she needs. She's very open about her feelings and thoughts. I make sure to do what I can to help." I guess a psychopath's relationships with their friends and family are similar to their romantic relationships in that they don't feel emotional connections with them per se, but friendships are beneficial to them, so they have a logical reason to maintain them. A psychopath wouldn't do a favour for their friend because they are emotionally invested in helping them out, or because they'd feel bad saying no, but doing a friend a favour maintains the friendship and makes it more likely that the friend would do them a favour when they need it in the future. I think in a lot of ways, having a psychopath for a friend wouldn't be that different to anyone else. As I said before, they are great at masking the signs of psychopathy, so most of the time you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. We all have different types of friendships on different levels. You have your best friends who you know you can always depend on, you can talk to them about anything and they'll never let you down. Then you might have some friends who are less reliable, you can't really have deep conversations with them, but they are fun to be around. You can go out for drinks with them and laugh and have a great time. Perhaps a friend who you know is a psychopath would just be another type of friend. You know they wouldn't feel emotional empathy towards you, so you couldn't expect to receive any genuine sympathy from them. But that doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't be able to rely on them at all or enjoy their company. Another question OP answered was what he does for fun in his free time and if he thinks having fun feels different for him. Quote, "Mostly spend time with my wife, go to a shooting range or to my cabin, I work out a lot. Yes, because I don't really experience it as fun. Everything I do is mostly for a purpose, like working out so I can stay in good physical shape. Shooting range helps me remain a good marksman. I don't do things if it isn't for a purpose." It's quite hard to imagine not experiencing fun when most people's recreational activities are done for the purpose of having fun. It'd be strange to not feel enjoyment or entertainment from watching a movie or partaking in hobbies, and to not see a point in doing something if there isn't a useful purpose. I guess because of this, you could potentially be a much more productive person than most, but it seems kind of empty to not be able to have fun. I doubt a psychopath would see it this way though, if that's the only way they've ever known. As for OP's work, there were a few questions about how his psychopathy affects it. He said he became a homicide detective because he likes the challenge and the puzzle of solving a case. He sees it as a benefit that he isn't affected by emotions because they don't cloud his judgment, and he's able to analyse a crime scene without it making him queasy. Furthermore, I guess the lack of emotions means he's less likely to get burnt out. As he said, he views cases as a puzzle to solve. It sounds like it's a game to him because he doesn't get emotionally invested. He's also particularly good at interrogating suspects because he can mold himself into whoever he needs to be to get a confession. He is sometimes able to recognize signs of psychopathy in others, but most of the suspects he dealt with weren't actually psychopaths, they were just normal people who made a bad decision, usually because of their emotions. There were a few people who weren't convinced by OP, pointing out that psychopath AMAs have become pretty common and OP could have just been copying the others. Some didn't believe that OP would have been able to become a detective if he was a psychopath. I'm not sure about this, more so because I don't even know where OP lives, but I don't think it's impossible. He would have had psychological evaluations, but if he has high-functioning ASPD, as he says, I'm not sure if there'd be anything that'd cause him to fail. You don't have to have empathy and other emotions to be a detective, you just have to be good at your job and not act in a dangerous way. As long as you can control your behaviour, I don't see why it would really matter what is going on in your mind. OP said that the psych evaluation didn't cover ASPD specifically, so it wasn't a problem. Anyway, I find OP convincing enough, and while I don't know for sure that he is telling the truth, his answers are pretty consistent with what my research has told me about psychopaths. The next post we'll cover was simply titled, "I was tortured, ask me anything." It read, "Bit of a strange one I know, but it was a long time ago and I'm up for sharing what most people in real life won't ask me to my face. At the age of 12, I was invited to a friend's house and was subjected to an ordeal at the hands of 3 older lads, which lasted almost 13 hours. I spent 25 days in hospital and required 3 surgeries over the following 2 years to repair the damage caused. Of course, the first question on most people's minds was, what happened? OP said he had an ongoing argument with a kid from school who was the younger brother of one of the perpetrators, involving name-calling and shoving that he didn't think was that serious until the incident. I'm going to keep the details of the attack somewhat vague, but he was beaten with various different objects, SA'd, strangled, burned, and the perpetrators tried to hang him but the cord snapped. He remembers the first hour or so well, then his memory was patchy after that. Some parts are very clear, and others he only remembers from the court case. Surprisingly, OP didn't experience much pain through most of it. He thinks adrenaline kicked in, and as soon as he saw blood, he went into autopilot. He said the recovery process was very painful though. The next morning, he managed to escape out of the bathroom window and was found by the postman. He has no memory of this at all, or of being taken to the hospital. The perpetrators were charged with false imprisonment and grievous bodily harm with intent. One was sentenced to 8 years in prison, another got 6 years, and the third was given a suspended sentence, but he ended up assaulting someone else the following year and spent 3 years in prison after that. What happened to OP is absolutely sickening, and to hear one of his attackers only got a suspended sentence is shocking. The one who got 6 years went back to prison for something else just a month or 2 after he was released, so it's safe to say he wasn't reformed. The SA charges were dropped because it was determined that they hadn't planned to do it, so they basically got away with that part of it. I don't get why it would matter if they planned to SA him or not. They still did it, and they clearly planned the attack itself. They targeted OP because he had a disagreement with one of their brothers, which is a ridiculous reason anyway, because as OP said, it wasn't that serious. And they'd spoken about it over text before it happened, talking about cutting something off him. Apparently the judge was pretty lenient with the 2 main instigators because they had a rough upbringing. I don't really understand this. Of course, a difficult childhood can significantly affect behaviour, but it doesn't make you any less guilty of a crime. You can maybe understand why a person would be more likely to act in a certain way, but why should that mean they get a lighter sentence? The effect on the victim is still the same, it doesn't change the suffering inflicted on them. For a long time after the incident, OP was understandably traumatised. He couldn't even shower without swimming shorts for 4 years, and when the first attacker got released from prison, he couldn't leave the house for weeks due to fear. For years, he was too scared to be alone and wet the bed almost every night. He's now 30 years old and thankfully is doing much better. He went through therapy, and although he occasionally gets flashbacks and nightmares, he doesn't think about the incident often, and when he does, he doesn't feel the same anger that he did years ago. He said his family were very supportive, and people in his community went out of their way to be extra kind to him afterwards. When asked if he would take revenge, OP said that 10 years ago he would have, and quote, "I was very angry for a long time and spent years basically fantasizing about what I'd do to them if I had the chance. It was really disturbing stuff, but my therapist at the time summed it up pretty well. He told me that as long as I focused my energy on them, then they were still torturing me, and he was right. It didn't happen overnight, but I slowly decided that they'd gotten enough from me and I wasn't wasting another second of my time on them. A few years on, I rarely think about them, and when I do, I'm not burning with rage anymore." It's impossible for many of us to even imagine the trauma that OP experienced, but the fact that he was able to move past it is incredibly inspiring. I really hope he continues to live a fulfilling life now he has put the past behind him. He really deserves it. 14 years ago, there was a post on the I Am A subreddit titled, "I was wrongly convicted of SA on a minor, spent 3 years in jail, and was a registered S offender, just recently cleared. Ask me anything." The post read, "I am 32. When I was 25, I was accused by the daughter of a family friend who was 14 at the time of SA. She was profoundly disturbed, had been in and out of mental health facilities for years, and made up a story in which I came over to her house while her parents were out, got her drunk and high, and SA'd her repeatedly. She told her parents this story and her mother believed her. Her father had his doubts. I was arrested and the trial came down to her word versus mine. My alibi was viewed as suspect. I was at home and lived alone at the time. The DA was running for mayor at the time and wanted to appear tough on crime. I was offered a deal where I would serve no time, but I refused, so they went for jail time. I served 3 years in protective custody. For 2 years I was on the SO registry. Last year, the girl, now in her 20s, confessed to making up the whole story. I sued her and her family and received a 6-figure settlement. I cannot sue the cops or DA under state law unless I can prove collusion. My life was destroyed. I lost my job, my career, I'm a teacher, my fiancé, my family abandoned me. I lived in another state, changed my name, and literally speak to no one I knew in the first 30 years of my life. Ask me anything. A few notes. Yes, I sued the family of the accuser. I have no interest in suing anyone else. It's a horrible process and I'd rather never see another courtroom as long as I live. Please don't call her a bitch or any other derogatory words. I don't have hate in my heart. Thank you again." Before we get more into OP's story, I do need to point out that false allegations of this nature are rare, and whether you're a man or a woman, you're significantly more likely to be SA'd yourself than you are to be falsely accused of it. False allegations can ruin a person's life though, and they make it harder for genuine victims to come forward because of the possibility they might be accused of lying. Anyway, OP elaborates in the comments on some of the details in the post, so here's some more information. He grew up with the girl's dad and was close with him, and like a big brother to her. The deal he was offered was that he plead guilty, make a full confession, pay a huge fine, do around 1,000 hours of community service, live in a halfway house for SOs for 6 months, and be on the registry for life. He didn't want to confess to something he didn't do, and knew if he wrote a confession, he'd never be able to prove his innocence. The girl confessed her lie to her therapist during the trial, but the therapist didn't come forward. Her parents were also aware of her confession and said nothing. After his exoneration, she tried to contact him several times and left voicemails rambling, apologising, and begging him to forgive her. He got a restraining order against her after that. He wasn't able to get a good lawyer because he didn't have much in savings and he had no support from his family or friends. The only crime on his record prior to this was shoplifting after he stole soda from 7-Eleven when he was 19. One thing that amazes me about OP is his level of understanding and even empathy towards the girl. One commenter called her a derogatory name and he replied, "Please don't call her that. Seriously, as angry as I am, she was a sick kid. The adults around her are the bastards here. The DA who used my case as an example of how awesome he was at busting perps, the school district that fired me instantly, my union for not backing me up at all on that. My family and friends, the useless public defender I had who might as well have slept through the trial. The girl has been in and out of hospitals for years. She's on a pharmacy of meds, will be for life. When her parents die or are too old to care for her, she'll likely end up herself. She's tried many, many times." I wouldn't really blame OP if he felt nothing but hatred towards someone who literally ruined his life, but he's somehow able to see through the anger and to some extent understand what led her to do what she did. Of course, that doesn't make it any better, but I think that's probably helped him to move past it. I also really appreciate that OP shot down a few misogynistic comments about women in general from people who were probably expecting him to agree and join in. He could be angry at the whole world, but it really seems that he has processed his anger in a healthy way. Like the OP of the last post came to realise, focusing your energy on people who wronged you will only waste more of your life. As difficult as it would be to let go of the resentment, it's necessary in order to move on. I don't think OP could have done a better job of moving on than he has. At the time of the post, he'd been with his current girlfriend for a year, and she was really understanding of the situation. He has made new friends, and he was able to go back to teaching, though decided to teach adults rather than children after what happened. He seems like a genuinely good person, and I hope he continued to progress in life in the 14 years since that post. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, plus any suggestions you might have for a future video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members, whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new video.